In today's Maelstrom of Lore,
So it's like a civil war between superhuman warriors that spans the galaxy.
That's the Horus Heresy.
The Moonwolf misunderstanding.
as well as
They're like, but why do you trust the Emperor? It's like, well, I mean, he's the Emperor. It's like, well, if Horus told you to do something, the Emperor told you to do something, what would you do? It's like, I guess I would do what Horus told me to do.
this is the Maelstrom of Lore.
MiniWarGamer Dave here from MiniWarGaming.com. Welcome, Wargamers, to the Maelstrom of Lore. In this
Further every time.
It's every time the card goes a little bit further.
Who's gonna pick all those up?
Here we have today, we have Steve the Mountain, and we have Luca the Dice, and then we have Scary, Scarred Cast,
The Archon?
the Archon.
They were around in the Heresy.
They were.
We have James behind. He's using the cogitator right now, which is a computer and multiple servitor. You're some sort of admech on the other side, functioning with ones and zeros.
Are you saying he's
Yeah.
lobotomized?
He's see, why would he be lobotomized? I don't know the reason. I don't know the lore reason.
Does that come from the Heresy?
That's a
Oh,
good
yeah, they'd be
question.
there.
Yeah.
So we are talking about the Horus Heresy right now, and if you're coming in from YouTube or from wherever you might have seen a clip, welcome. This is the first time we are learning about the Horus Heresy in a Noobhammer degree. Let's call it that, because let's face it, a lot of books exist.
Oh, there's a lot. Not all of them are great.
I would agree with that statement.
That's true.
There's a lot of places to go, but so let's do Noobhammer. So let's say a little bit more than
Hammer?
It's like the
noob.
Noob, okay.
Noob.
Sounded like a noob. I was like,
no, Noob Hammer. You know nothing about it. 8-year-old to an 8-year-old. What's the Horus
That's right.
Heresy?
Dave's 8.
Okay,
wait,
so
you
I'm
calling
8.
fans 8-year-olds?
No,
Some of
Dave's
them.
8.
Dave's 8.
I'm 8 years old in the brain.
Yes.
Okay, and barely older. Rest everywhere else, and so now it's that level of explain Horus Heresy in 1 minute,
Okay.
knowing that I'm 8 years old.
Why are you all looking at me?
How would you do it, Scary? Let's give you.
How would I say? Okay.
have an
The
8-year-old
first
son.
story that you read about in Warhammer, in the rulebook, is about Space Marines and a civil war between Space Marines. So it's like a civil war between superhuman warriors that spans the galaxy.
That's the Horus Heresy.
The Moonwolf misunderstanding.
The Moon Wolf misunderstanding.
Coming soon to theater near you.
Coming soon to a theater near you. $6 billion budget.
Only makes 10 million in the box office.
Okay, I actually get that. So that makes sense. It's a big civil war.
So you have this massive galaxy-spanning leader who had 18 sons, and so they're all his generals, and eventually they all rebelled. They all had.
They didn't all rebel against.
Well, in certain ways they did actually, but yeah, no,
Fair.
eventually they all had problems with Dad and turned on each other.
Actually,
and fought.
The only time I really read about the heresy was like when I started playing the game, which was like 3rd edition Warhammer. There was this like the rule book. It had almost anything that you knew was out of that book.
Yep.
Right.
I probably shouldn't play with this.
Yes, Luca.
Probably shouldn't play with this. Mike, can you hear that, James? You're probably curious what's going on. That's me. Sorry, everyone.
Notice, let's just not play with it.
Let's not play with it, Luca. It's funny because it was very straightforward and there wasn't a lot of information, and a lot of it was conjecture, and this might have happened or that might have happened.
Well,
But then over the last 20 years, the Horus Heresy has like expanded in
so
like this
there's two very interesting
massive.
tidbits, and we're going to expand upon these. The reason why we even have the Horus Heresy is because there was a Titanicus game many moons ago, and they didn't have a budget to make 2 kinds of models, so Civil War. But Heresy for my entire childhood was the age of heroes, the age of myth. There wasn't nothing. Everything was alluded to. Nothing was set in stone.
You had no idea. You had no. It was all like, oh, this might have happened, or this and this, and it was all like this massacre here and that. There was no detail.
Back then, the Primarchs were just Space Marines too. They weren't like, they weren't different. They weren't described as different. They were just bigger Space Marines. Same capabilities. They were just like the leaders of the Space Marines. Yeah.
And this game comes out.
Back in Rogue, that's like Rogue Trader, 2nd edition, 3rd edition. It was all. I don't even think the Horus Heresy. I actually don't know what year Horus Rising came out, But a little bit before that, the Heresy started getting a little more expanded. Then they decided to actually write the entire series.
As a kid, one of the biggest parts of my hobby beyond like list building was spending time on the internet forums and just talking about like various Warhammer things. But
What's a forum?
Yeah, right. That's
What's a forum?
Chat rooms on the internet.
Where people role played as
Oh, that was some of that too.
Yeah.
But
generals and overlords.
A topic that would come up regularly would be people would be like, what if the Primarchs had stats? What would they be? Now, we're talking in the context, this is like 3rd, 4th, 5th edition rule set for 40K.
Movie Marines.
And everybody's like, every Primarch would be 10 across the board or whatever. And I remember when the book first came out and like the baseline stat for a Primarch was basically 6 across the board. 10 leadership, obviously, and weapon skill varied. Yeah. But it was like, whoa, they are better than Space Marines, but they're not these godlike beings that they became for a while in the Age of Myth when we're talking about it.
Yeah.
And then it was also really cool because they elaborated a lot on the stories because it was the way it was posed in like the original books was like good versus evil.
Oh, absolutely,
right, which was straight up like chaos. Emperor, mankind, good. At least they alluded to it being like the best of the two options, right? But then you start getting into Horus Heresy, and they really dove in to the sort of like tragic downfall of a lot of these characters.
Well, they gave them actual character and flaws, which is their best part about them.
Right. And then, so they're not just like, oh, we're evil and we don't like the Emperor. It was like misunderstanding.
You buy everybody's motivation.
Right.
Like, yeah.
And until they fall, like, you're like, oh, okay, they're just a little different, and all the different legions are different, and they like fight differently, or they have their own motivation or whatever. And then there's something that happens, which is like the hubris, and then they like go on this downturn where some
it's
of them
all
were
ego.
That's right. And some of them were like tricked into,
all right.
Anyway.
So this is good because we're moving it along, right? So Civil War. Now there's some ego involved here. So
absolutely. Yeah.
Who's
Magnus?
Yeah.
No, really? You think so?
He did everything wrong.
Magnus, technically, I talked about it a little bit in the last segment, but there's this one.
You got a lot of enjoyment out of that story. You knew that was a bomb.
This is a Horus Heresy podcast.
It was Magnus's ego that technically led to the entire. Well, not the
Do you think it was his ego?
Well, he was told not to do it.
But
nobody knows what we're talking about.
It was
exactly. Wait. What was his ego? What happened?
Well, there's 18 legions.
Well,
18 legions.
Rewind.
Each one had a Primarch, which we talked about. Now, they became like these superhuman, sort of like literal genetic embodiments of the God Emperor. Who wasn't technically God at that time. He was just the Emperor. And worship of him as a god was a bad thing.
Yep. That was outlawed.
Yes.
Religion was outlawed, actually. That's a big fact. During the Horus Heresy, during the Unification Wars, right before the Horus Heresy, there was a big war of religion, and then religion after the Unification Wars was outlawed.
We can't really talk about the Emperor without talking about a little bit of the prelude stuff.
Right? Yes. Okay, let's rewind there then.
Let's rewind. There was the vastness of space.
Thunder Warriors.
Thunder Warriors.
So now we're talking about like the start of civilization then.
We're talking about like the unification of humanity. So like I think before
the end
the
of
Emperor,
civilization actually
was like before the Emperor there was a big human galactic empire. So before the Emperor, big human galactic empire. Then came the Age of Darkness.
Yep. Yes.
And then everything got splintered. Like communication broke down, couldn't interstellar travel.
He existed.
The Emperor was alive, existed, and then all the different civilizations sort of fragmented. And then the Emperor came along, unified Earth with his brand new Thunder Warriors, which were like Space Marines, but they were like more aggressive.
They were proto Space Marines. Yeah, they were like real aggressive, kind of like attack dogs, essentially.
They wore their helmets, but they didn't need no face shields.
Yeah, they had weird. They had Mark I power armor. It was weird looking. They had the helmet, but no it was like only a Judge Dredd helmet almost, but glass. You can see their eyes.
Yeah.
Huh. It didn't enclose fully. It was a weird.
So that was
these, not that we're going to get into this, but these things were more powerful than Space Marines.
They were much stronger than the Space Marines. Yeah.
But
Like,
they were
physically
very
stronger.
erratic.
Yes.
And like prone to just
They
being
were needed
angry.
to conquer Terra.
So they were needed just like lay down
to unify Terra.
the law.
And Terra being Earth.
Earth. Yep.
Yeah, proxy for Earth, I guess.
Proxy
in
for
this
Earth.
universe.
So is Terra Earth many
Yes.
years in the future?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what we're going for.
This planet is called Terra.
Is
If
it?
we
Yeah.
go by the naming,
like
all the planets were named. It's Terra was named at the same time. We call it Earth now, but
Yeah, it's like different language.
Jupiter, Saturn, Terra,
Definitely
it's all-
not.
This is Terra.
Terrible.
Not same place.
Moving on.
Is it moving?
But yeah, he conquered. It was like it took a
So
long,
back to Magnus.
back to Magnus. Okay, well, Magnus was one of his Primarchs, one of his sons.
So Magnus was one of the.
Well,
We can't get to this without talking about like how the
That's fair.
all
That's fair.
the
Back
all
there.
the Primarchs got separated from the Emperor in the first place.
Yes.
Like if we're gonna
By
go
design.
like
Yes,
deep dive.
that's true.
That was
So the Emperor was starting to work with like genetically altered humans,
Yep.
which were the Thunder Warriors. He unified Earth, and then he basically perfected it into the Primarchs, which were like he cloned these like or genetically altered these humans to be like embodiments of like
We gave them all
perfection.
mental disabilities.
He did, like
They-
Rogel Dorn.
All of them.
They all had that.
We had Rogel Dorn.
Well, they all have their like flaws.
Yeah, they pretty much embodied like all of like humanity's flaws, but like they had like a big like they were
all
extremes of
designed.
them.
They were all designed to do a specific job.
You're talking about the Primarchs.
Yes,
Primarchs were designed to conquer the reunify humanity. They're all particularly good at a thing to help the Emperor do exactly what he needed to do is put all humans back under his fold.
Right.
And each Primarch in Primarch Legion embodied a certain trait of humanity.
Correct.
but what
Or the Emperor.
what
Yeah,
of-
maybe
Or the
that's-
Emperor.
fragments of it, right? But like what happened was while they were still in conception, they were in their like little vials or little test tubes while they were growing. There was
Test
one
tube babies.
there was like a whole there wasn't just the Emperor, there was like a team of them working together, and they were all
Who are they?
so it was like the Emperor is like a type of
I don't think we need to get into them. It's too much.
there's more than the Emperor. The Emperor is just the psychic one, and he's the most ambitious one. But there was many
Entities that had a design
They're
for the universe.
overall not relevant to the heresy.
They don't really
Bunch
get
of
brought up
aliens.
at all.
of them. No, they're all
No,
humans.
humans.
Oh, they're
all
humans.
born human.
Co-workers.
Co-workers.
Yes.
Co-workers of the
Okay, a
Emperor.
bunch of co-workers and some sort of
They're
design.
they call themselves the immortals. Super basic. They were born with
Okay,
immortality.
that's
They're all
easy.
humans born with immortality.
That's easy.
And then tell me about what Chaos did.
Yeah, essentially, there was
That's debated.
they were all of the
What does that mean?
Yeah, all of the tubes were essentially shuttled off,
Flung into the universe.
flung into the galaxy to different planets.
Flung by whom?
Astartes did it.
And what is Astartes?
There we go. This is where it gets. This is where it gets.
See, it's going to get too deep.
But I think we're in the Maelstrom already.
We'll never get to the heresy.
So Astartes.
No, this is in general terms.
I guess
They were in one spot. They get separated and flung far across the galaxy. By whom? Leave us a comment down below. Let us know what you think.
Was it Zinch? Was it Astartes? But is the
Could've been
Emperor's
anything.
actual plan?
Maybe that's what he wanted to do. He needed
is
to
what
torture
he-
his kids for them to
That's-
learn a lesson.
It is by design. It was by his design.
It was from what it seemed like. Astartes was like.
MiniWarGaming does not condone the torture of children.
No, we do not.
The Emperor did, though.
The Emperor did.
We're
We do
just
not
stating
condone the
facts.
actions of the Emperor.
Astartes
of mankind.
approved.
We are just stating facts.
Yes.
The,
in the terms of the Emperor. So
She was afraid of what he was going to do with them. They were always arguing. They didn't quite agree. And she's like, you know what? Boop, they're going somewhere.
Yep.
They're going to go live lives on their own. Because he wanted to raise them himself. She said, no, they're going to go and...
So is Astartes his wife?
No,
The
not,
Emperor's wife?
more like the mother of the Primarchs is an easier way to say it. Yeah.
A one-night stand?
No,
No.
they're not like that.
There's like a whole team of them working together on it. And she was
she was
like
one of the team.
She was one of the team. She was
That's,
like,
that's where my brain went. Okay.
it was actually a lot of her work that went into it. She was like the brains behind the project in a lot of ways.
So they were her babies.
Yeah, but
Just
she
as
didn't-
much as they were his babies.
She didn't like the direction he was going to go with them. So I mean,
You said
some-
direction, right?
Yeah, what his plans were.
But he knew that was going to happen. He knew she was going to do that.
Hold on.
And
He
her
knew
do-
that she
Yeah.
was going.
Her doing that was part of his plan.
that's what it kind of alludes to. Yeah.
And that's
he was angry,
why
but he was
this
still angry
story
about
is
it.
Because she did it a little bit early.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Like the
So
heresy
they were.
popped up.
So all the Primarchs ended up on vastly different worlds that were already populated by humans.
Right.
But they were all creatures that nurture. What is the term? Growing up in your environment. What is
Nurture versus nature.
Nature versus nurture.
Yeah, exactly that. So they all had different upbringing. Some of them had great upbringing. Some of them did not have great upbringing.
Like Angron.
Like Angron.
So it defined who they were as they grew up, but it just kind of like skewed more into their personality and who they were, and like what their ticks were essentially.
And then the Emperor ends up starting his unification of the galaxy,
Henry
the
Cavill,
Great
yeah.
Crusade, which is what we called.
The Great
And
Crusade is so cool.
and he had these big Space Marine legions, which he essentially made
To be
thousands and thousands and thousands of Space Marines
Right.
that he then used to help conquer the galaxy. And at that time, Space Marines were like the main force, and they had everything. They had Navy, they had Space Marines, they had Guardsmen. They were like these giant, self-sustaining super fleets of spaceships that would go to like a system or a solar system or like a nearby solar system, and they'd create contact. They'd be like, are you human enough that we don't have to eliminate all of you? Are you alien? Are you, corrupted in any
You
way?
can carry entire campaigns on their own without the need for
Yeah.
which is
They were for their own recruiting, their own buildings,
And
new
what-
Space Marines, everything.
What is this time period called?
The Great Crusade. Yeah.
Great Crusade.
Correct.
Yeah, because humanity had already conquered the stars, but because they messed with AI, which rebelled, it caused the Age of Darkness, and then all of humanity was separated, and the Emperor's like, we got to get everyone back together.
Hold on.
And that's...
It kind of feels like real life is a reflection of that.
now we'll be fine.
Yeah, it's like...
We're tampering with AI right now as we speak.
Now we'll be fine.
They can hear
they're called...
us.
They've already heard us.
They're known as the Men of
They
Iron.
wrote this
Okay.
episode.
Men of Iron, so it's actually a thing.
Which, by the way, you can play in a game called Blackstone Fortress. There's a little man of iron.
There's one man
that
of
walks around with a little Gatling cannon, and he goes, "I'm loyal" or whatever, because he has a little sticker that has a little Imperial Eagle on it, and he's like, "I'm no AI. I'm a servitor."
They won,
pretends to be a
humanity
servitor.
won the war.
Pretend to be a
What's that?
He pretends to be a servitor.
Oh,
Yeah.
awesome.
They beat the Men of Iron, but it caused the whole galaxy to go into like an Age of Darkness. Yeah.
Right.
And define Age of Darkness.
So
we
darkness
have
being
no
like
technology.
nobody could communicate with anybody.
So
like
that-
all the systems were
There was no infrastructure.
there was no like
no communication.
correct, and nobody could navigate a long distance.
They lost a lot of
So they lost their long distance navigation.
Were there stars?
Yes.
Yeah, and it's more of like a technological darkness.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Massive EMP.
Yeah, well, they lost the means to travel from one another. So some of them stayed connected. There were examples of some planets that were close enough together that they still had the technology to get back and forth. But there was a lot of individual planets that had
Really
humans
cut off.
like Fenris, like all the ones with the Primarchs on them. The Cadio is one of them. There's a lot of them. Like literally millions. Humanity had terraformed, conquered the galaxy, already established. But then they lost the way to communicate. Terra was completely shot into like a world. Like Terra was the most affected. It was like pretty much.
We're jumping through timeline a lot here, but
Yeah.
yeah. So humans conquer galaxy, Age of Darkness kind of like spread out. Emperor goes to start his Great Crusade to reconquer, creates his 20, but we're gonna talk about 18 sons, gets scattered. He now needs to go gather them up and continue.
Yeah,
his
so as he
Great
conquers the
Crusade.
Great Crusade, he runs into planets where these great individuals have made a name for themselves already.
Yes.
And then what he does is he ends up reuniting the Primarchs with the legions that he made from their genetic material.
He still had their.
So their genetic material was
Thank
what
you, Scary.
went to the legions to make each individual legion. So that's how he was able to pair them up and be like,
Yes.
you're made from Angron. You're
Right.
made from
Right. Okay.
Lionel Johnson.
Yeah. So that's really, really cool. I love that. Actually makes a lot of sense too, with bits and pieces of things that you hear when you're not deep diving into stuff. Specifically you, thank you for keeping us back on track every time. It's you, Scary. It's like, okay, so
Other than the bad puns.
I'm trying to like,
What?
'cause there's a
question
lot
do
of
you have?
directions.
Yeah. What question do you have?
Yeah.
I want to keep going with.
Well,
it.
how does this relate to the actual heresy? I think something you need to know.
no, right. Eventually we'll get there. But there's so many more questions before
3
we even get
hours
there.
later.
That's a long discussion.
Right.
Trying to keep it to like one relatively
Well, because you could
consumable
you
segment.
could do hours on
Just the Unification Wars.
We can
Right.
talk about
So-
every individual
so much.
legion and have an entire episode on each legion from Primarch
Yes.
story
Yes.
and all the
Yeah.
way to like
And that's
you
what
know,
we will
their
do.
end.
Their upbringings.
Absolutely.
and
I mean,
everything,
Their
yeah.
upbringings and everything.
If we're
Each
talking
and
about
every
it-
one.
Even the Horus Heresy book series, there's a good 10 books before the heresy starts.
Yeah.
It's all Great Crusade.
Yeah.
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 I love the Great Crusade.
well, it was the
books.
build up to then the heresy because as it goes, tensions start building, and now you have the emperor who starts getting busy with the administrative part of like running a galactic spanning empire, and so he names Horus Lupercal as his war master.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where
That was a contentious move too.
And
yeah.
Why was that a contentious move?
several other Primarchs thought they deserved.
Like Magnus.
they were all
No,
No,
Magnus-
Sanguinius.
I thought he had a big ego.
Yeah.
They all did,
Sanguinius,
but-
Sanguinius,
Did he reject it?
they thought Sanguinius was going to be appointed, but then there's individuals like Perturabo and Rogel Dorn who were a little miffed about it,
and Johnson.
and Johnson. They're all like, they understood that why Horus is picked. They're like, we're kind of mad it wasn't us though, but it was not so mad that they were like bitter about it. Maybe Perturabo a little bit and Rogel
And
Dorn a little
Johnson.
bit, and Johnson. I guess.
All of them.
Maybe
So-
they're a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, maybe they're a little hurt by this.
We
Maybe
don't-
there's a little bit
we're
of drama.
super familiar with all these names.
Yeah.
Right.
you know,
yeah,
but
so they're just
each-
names of the Primarchs. that
These are all
you're
Primarchs
throwing
we're
out
talking
there.
about.
And the Primarchs
Yeah.
before Horus was appointed War Master were equals. They were
Yes.
All the Primarchs were equals
they
in
were
the
all
eyes of.
generals of them. See, they're all the generals. They're all the same. They're Primarch. That was their rank, right? That
Yeah.
was like they're the Primarch of the Legion. They have 100% say over what their Legion fleet, their like crusading fleet was. They each had a whole fancy number designation to it, and that's how you identified
Yeah.
which Legion took which planet and brought it into compliance and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But yeah, so Horus did not want to be the War Master. He thought it would bring too many complications in the structure.
He didn't want it.
No, he didn't want to be the War Master.
That's why in the
why
new
he-
trailer he said, "I never wanted this."
Yeah, he never wanted to be the War Master. None of that. No,
That's
was
what he
like-
said.
He's like the best of them, right? That's what he's supposed to be. He's kind of like the Mary Sue of the Primarchs.
Until he got stabbed.
He got stabbed. He was like, see, that was his ego. That's actually his ego that caused that.
Caused what?
His downfall.
So
technically.
he didn't succeed in his charge to.
Well, he did. He was very good at it. And a lot of the legions looked up to him. But there was this guy called Erebus. Yep.
Erebus, I've heard of him.
You probably-
Again, his name comes up.
Yeah. No, he's probably it's him and Corferon who are like the fathers of the heresy, technically.
Erebus, that's the dude that did a no against Karn.
Well, he killed Argotal.
Yeah, he killed his best mate.
He killed
and you
Karn's
don't
best
do
buddy.
that.
Yep. Oh, sorry, spoiler for Betrayer.
Yeah, this is.
My bad.
We should just put it in the description.
gonna
that
be
the
a lot of
The whole
spoilers.
thing is a spoiler, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, specifically that book, which is amazing.
Now,
That's actually my favorite
were
book.
there orcs during the heresy?
Yes.
Like another
And
factions?
there's Necrons too. Yep. The Necrons were waking up and everything. The Necrons have been waking up long before that, but the Necrons were active. Eldar were active. Dark Eldar were active. Harlequins. Actually, most of the not Tau, I guess.
Okay,
What else was there?
so like,
There was a lot of also. Sorry to interrupt. There's also like a lot of smaller Xenos races that were like focused on like one planet, one system that they would come across, and unfortunately, they didn't exist anymore after the. They were very like human only. They were very xenophobic. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's the standard. For
Oh, I
the
see.
Imperium, yes.
Okay.
So they like Scary said, they would come to a planet, they would notice that there's humans on this planet, and they'd be like, "What do you remember?" Because you got to remember, between the Age of Darkness and the Great Crusade is about 15,000 years. So these planets
Okay.
have been growing on their own. Maybe it's 10,000. It's a lot of years.
Yeah.
These planets were growing, developing their own cultures and their own technologies, their own forms of government over 10,000 years already, separated from Terra. So Terra might not even exist in their minds. It might be a mythical, like, where'd we come from? Well, we were always here. In fact, the Horus Heresy book starts beautifully with the opening line of Loken saying, "I was there the day that Horus slew the Emperor." But the way the story still gives me chills, because the story starts with them bringing a human world into compliance. They're at Earth, and they're fighting the Emperor of mankind on Earth. But what it is a human planet that was one of the many connected to it. And then over the course of 10,000 years, they had come up with the idea that they were Earth the whole time. They heard stories about Earth and like the home world. Like, no, this is where we've always been. this is Earth. This is the homeworld. I'm the emperor of this Earth. So they just always had an emperor. They called themselves Earth, and then they refused to believe that the imperial forces that had arrived were from the original Earth, saying like, no, this is the original Earth. You're wrong. So they refused to comply. So they went to war, and Horus had to kill the emperor. So that's why the line says I was there the day that Horus slew the emperor of mankind, because this guy was the self-proclaimed emperor of mankind on Earth, but
it wasn't really Earth.
But it wasn't the original Earth. It was
Or
what
the
they
original
thought
emperor.
was Earth, because they had been so separated for
And
so long.
what was the name of that planet?
They called it Terra. They called it Earth. Yeah.
And what was the name of the dude who had issue?
The guy who got killed. He just called himself the master of mankind. He was the emperor of mankind.
So, but he's not the
He was just a
emperor.
human. He was just a regular dude. Well,
So
he was noble on this planet, I guess.
So hold on. Does that emperor die?
Yes.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, he gets
Yeah,
killed.
he
Yeah.
gets-
Well, because what happens is Horus was always like the diplomat first. He was very charismatic, and he was always very patient.
Yeah.
But what happened was he had you hear the Mournival? The Mournival is like,
Heard of the name Mournival.
yeah, so it's like Horus.
That's all I know.
Horus was always very aware of his power, and like he could just say whatever he wanted and it would go. But he didn't want his word to be the final word, so he always had a council of 4 captains that he would always confer to. He's like, "This is what I want to do. How messed up is this?"
Mm.
And he grounded it into their heads that you tell me when I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, do not be afraid to say anything about it, because who am I to dictate all of this? That's why Horus was so beloved in the first book, because he was very charismatic, right?
Yeah.
And so his Mournival, one of his members, I want to say I can't remember his name. I apologize. He died
Sir
early.
Janus.
Sir Janus, thank you. Yes.
Awesome, James.
Yes. So Sir Janus was one of his Mournival who he had sent as an ambassador to go and talk to him. And this emperor who he went to go talk to listened to him for a little bit, but essentially it was like they just executed Sir Janus on the spot. He didn't even give. And then Horus like, I tried, and he's killed. He loved Sir Janus. He was like his favorite. And he's like, I got no time for this. Just go. And it was like a comical like over right away. But the Horus wanted to deal with the emperor himself personally. That's why the line is, I was there the day that Horus slew the emperor of mankind, because the emperor of mankind, the so-called emperor of mankind, killed.
But that's like in terms prophesizes what's going to happen.
correct. It's like foreshadowing for the Horus Heresy, right? But it's just so it was really well done. I liked it a lot. It was the first line of the Horus Rising. Yeah. But then the story is like that compliance. It kind of gives you an idea of what the Great Crusade is trying to accomplish in the galaxy. And often, actually not often, it was like sometimes they come to war, but more often than not, they come across a human civilization and peace would come through first. Most of the Primarchs would offer diplomacy first. Not a lot of them did, though.
Yeah. So let's just say that they've been developing the story for 30, since the
think it's
beginning,
like
45
38 years.
Yeah, 40 years or so. But really diving in.
Well, you couldn't say the heresy's that long. It's been like 15.
The heresies, okay,
For the books.
The book.
And like
Yeah,
heresies,
but before the books,
there was nothing.
written.
It was all
It's
conjecture.
all-
Yeah,
it's
but
very,
they had the idea of the heresy
ultra
with that
minimal.
misstep they did with Adeptus Titanicus back in the day. Yeah.
Or Spawn.
What does that mean?
So Steve talked about it earlier. You can go.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So it's like you back in the day they had Epic Adeptus Titanicus. They had that small scale, like they wanted to play with Titans, right?
This is a board, a tabletop
Game from
miniature
back
game.
in the 90s, I believe. That came maybe even before
I
that,
think
but
before that.
it might have been before that. But they their deadline was coming up.
Okay.
This is just a story. I don't know how true this is. I've heard it. Everyone else has heard it.
Whispers in the War.
Correct.
We've all heard the story though, but yeah.
Hey, it could be true.
it's
I'm hearing this for the first time.
So they had they had only made the molds and produced the Imperial Titans, the warlords and all that stuff. And they were working on all the Xeno stuff, but their deadline came up. There were some issues. And so they only had Imperial ones. And like, how the heck are we going to sell only Imperial ones? And some dude's like, just make up some story or something why they're fighting, like some civil war or some nonsense. And then it's like, okay, perfect, great idea. They had to roll with that. And they called it I think they just literally called it the Horus Heresy. That was it. That's how it was. And then people were like, what's the Horus Heresy?
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course they're going to ask what that is.
What's the Horus Heresy? And they're like, well, you see,
So there's this guy named Horus.
there was some guy named
and
Horus.
he didn't like the emperor very much.
I don't know if that's like 100% factual, but that's the story I've heard.
Huh.
I choose to believe it.
It could have been like they already had the idea of the Horus Heresy like penned up somewhere, and they're like, oh, let's just use that as the
Let's
excuse.
just use that.
Because it was already maybe in conception. That kind of just sent like that was like the early.
It's so fun. I love the story. I love the story. And then it gets to like towards there's so many like iconic moments that as a kid I just remember reading, and it just like burned in the back of my brain, like the Siege of Terra, and like how, you know, Horus slayed Sanguinius, and like all these iconic moments. As a tabletop gamer who loves the Warhammer 40,000
That
universe,
story is old.
that story
That's
is
one of the
like
first solidified stories,
Right.
You know what I mean? We've had
that diorama
ending,
on
that
display at
diorama.
Warhammer World.
Yeah, it
It's
is.
been there forever.
There it
Cue
is.
the picture.
I did. Took a picture of it when I was at Warhammer
It's
World.
like the little like old school Rogue
Yeah,
Trader models. And everything
old
converted.
models,
Yeah.
old
They're so
models.
tiny. Yeah.
They're so small.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that obviously people that got there's a lot of engagement on that one.
Well, that they got that really famous print now. That art print's been around forever. Though it's like Horus overlooking the corpse of Sanguinius with the Emperor just below him in his cloud. That's really, I like that piece of art a lot.
Yeah, there's it's iconic.
There was a magic card that came out for the 40K set, which was a like a stained glass memoriam to the siege of the Horus Heresy. It was beautifully, very well done. Yeah, that magic card is beautiful.
What was that? Do you remember the name of it?
Yeah, I think it's called the Horus Heresy. It was like it's called a saga card in Magic the Gathering. So
I'm just looking it up later.
yeah, it just it tells the
We'll
story.
just look it up later.
Cue the picture.
Yeah,
Cue the picture.
I believe it's called the Horus Heresy. Yeah, but it's
Yeah, well, that's really cool. So
I can't remember where we left off.
we left out basically the reason for the conflict.
Oh wait, so yeah, Horus was
The
the
siege of-
Master.
So he was
Okay.
appointed War Master.
Yeah.
And then
A little contentious.
it was because there were some of the Primarchs.
His brothers
who really
were like,
wanted
"Wow,
to be.
we get it, but
Sanguinius.
man,
They were like,
I wish it would have been.
You're
me."
telling us he's better than all of us, sort of thing. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
so that's and then he's in charge. So the Emperor goes back to Terra to deal with being an admin, right? So
Lighthouse
he
things.
stops. What? Sorry.
Lighthouse things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then he's like,
Lighthouse
yeah,
things.
exactly.
He had a secret project.
Astronomican was the secret project.
Super secret project, which wasn't that anyway? We'll get to Magnus in a second. But
We'll get to why he.
that secret project was also, there was like a lot of little things that led up to it.
yeah, it was like the Horus Heresy was like it's like one of those stories of a lot of little bad things that happen that have a big impact.
So
you know
Horus,
what I mean?
Horus didn't like that. He asked the Emperor, like, what is going on? And the Emperor said, I can't tell you right now. And he's like, you don't trust me? He's like, I'll tell you when I can, kind of thing. Right? He's like, so that right away kind of like what's going on here?
Also,
you can't-
like,
I'm your War Master.
was it like so Horus, and there's a transformation with Horus. Like Horus goes through like a quick transformation because he gets like stabbed by like a demon blade of some sort that is essentially going to kill him, right? And so his legion is like, oh my goodness, he's gonna die. So they take him to like this ancient like magic place, which is like
Erebus suggested.
ooh yeah.
That's why we don't like him.
And they're like, and so there's some acolytes or whatever, take him into this cave or something.
Very suspicious holistic healing. Very spiritual healing in a cave. It was like a week in a cave kind of thing.
Yeah, but it
healing
was-
stones.
Yeah, but then he comes out and they say he hit like Primarchs don't age. Okay, they're like
Well, this was
Oh,
a
he's
little.
immortal.
This is a little.
Was
this different? Same thing. Different
Same
part
thing?
of the story. Yeah.
okay.
That's
And
well.
doesn't he come out like aged?
Yes, that's the
he
Gate of Moloch.
visibly ages.
The
at-
Gate of Moloch.
That's later. That's later in the story.
okay, so at this point, like he heals and stuff and kind of messes him up a little bit.
He comes out the same, but the Mornival can kind of tell is a little off.
The Mournival tail is off.
No, his closest counsel, the
No,
Mournival,
they know
The
something.
three that are left
the
over.
four.
No, they appoint Loken. Loken becomes once Sir Janus dies. Loken becomes the fourth one.
Okay, so now we're rewinding back in the story where he's still alive.
Who?
No,
Loken?
no.
No, Sir Janus died. Sir
James
Janus
is dead.
Sir Janus.
His-
Okay, this is
replacement.
post him.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's all
Dang,
four
they just
members-
killed him right away.
the right on the right. He was like he was the most. He was like the favored of the Mournival, and he gets killed right away.
Right. Okay. All right.
No plot armor.
Yeah, no plot armor.
Not at all. No mark on that armor.
Loken is loaded with plot armor though. So Loken takes
Garviel?
over. Garviel Loken. Yeah,
See,
yeah.
like the fact that I knew his name
yeah.
means that he's got plot armor. He survived.
Then we'll get to the Grey Knights at some point.
Yeah, the Grey Knight. That's the Grey Knights formed during this as well, because that's like there's like so much. Like
It's
Stay on track. Stay on track.
they,
Stay on track.
they tie a lot of modern 40k into like a lot of this is already pre-planned. Like the Horus Heresy was technically supposed to be a planned event between Malcador and the Emperor as well. They knew it was going to go this.
Who's Malcador?
Malcador.
No, you sh-
I love this. We could do this all day.
Malcador
Hear no bell.
The Sigilite?
Malcador is another very powerful psyker that helps the Emperor do everything.
So Malcador is that. He's the Emperor's right-hand man. He's like He's the second most. I think he's more powerful than.
Isn't he the Lord Solar? Is that his like title?
I don't think he ever got.
No.
I don't. He's the Sigillite.
The Sigillite. Okay.
And why is he called the Sigillite?
Because he likes to put like little sigils, like little markings on things. So they just called him the Sigillite.
Are purity seals his fault?
No, purity seals came out afterwards. During they explained the purity.
I love
seal.
how you know that answer.
Yeah.
What is a purity seal?
You're
What is a
right.
purity seal?
No, I think actually Malkador does have something to do with that, but that was like later on. It wasn't his intent, but like some of his seals.
Malkador is
Spoiler.
a human-born psyker. More powerful
Malkador
than
dies.
More powerful than
But
Magnus?
not more powerful than the Emperor.
Not more powerful than the Emperor.
So Malkador the Sigillite is massively powerful. Then.
Absolutely. Yeah.
However, the Emperor did not want to acknowledge the existence of chaos or the warp to anyone.
Nope. He only
Right.
with Malkador.
Well, that's-
he shared everything with Malkador.
But
Okay.
that pulls back to where we were in the story.
Correct.
Right. Okay. So we go back because Horus has been injured by this demon blade.
Yeah, so he goes into this holistic like rock thing. Make sure you always consult your licensed physician.
Is this the Gate of Moloch?
No,
no, it's
not there
it's
yet.
later. It's later on.
Okay.
He comes out.
If you've never heard anything Horus Heresy, is this? Can you follow this? Are you following
Can you
this?
follow?
It's a long. It's I don't even. How many books is it? It's like so many books.
It's like 30 books.
50 or something.
It's like over 50.
Is it 50
And then
books?
that's like not including the Siege of Terror though.
Please
No, that's including the.
click the link in the description for our Amazon
Yeah.
our little
For a code that doesn't
for
exist.
our code no,
Which
Okay.
would be wonderful.
yeah, you
That'd be
can
amazing.
you can
But you know what? This is
all
support for
signed
the-
by Dave.
That wouldn't make it more valuable. That would decline.
They would be
It would be
defaced by
yes,
Dave.
Yes.
He comes out of this cave healed. He's better. He's fine. Everyone's happy.
But is he better?
Well, they notice he's different.
He's different.
What does that mean by
He's
different?
just different.
He just talks differently. He's got
He
different.
ta-
like not,
Something's off. Something's off.
you could tell something's off. He's not.
It's like when Luca has a bad day,
Yeah.
he comes in, something's off. You can tell.
You know.
okay,
you know
his
exactly
aura
what's
is off.
His aura. He's not saying. He doesn't have the same.
Charismatic persona.
Yeah. Like the word, he uses different words now. He doesn't. He's not the same speech pattern.
Okay, is he the same person?
That's always up. That's always up for debate. You know. That's like Horus essentially maybe even died.
And then the demon took over. We don't know.
What demon?
He was. I don't
We
know.
don't know. The Horus demon.
We don't know. We don't know. They don't know what demons.
They, they don't really go into detail about what exactly happened. He goes into cave, like the friggin' giant stone wheel door thing closes. There's like 2 giant stone doors.
Are we
close.
at the Gate of Moloch now?
No, that's much later. That's way later. That's like not even gonna come up probably. It might. We could speed it up.
Well,
for
look,
that, yeah.
but
I feel
this
so
is-
happy I
this
know
is-
something, and it's only a name of something
the
that's not
heresy
relevant
hasn't
right
started
now.
until after the gate, right? So this is like a second instance.
Oh, he does the gate after the
He
heresy
does.
pops up.
Okay, so
yeah.
he does the gate after. the
Okay,
heresy.
so where are we?
So what happens is he gets changed in this cave,
Yes.
Yeah.
and
Is there a
then he
name to this cave, or-
I don't know.
I can't. Do you remember the name of the cave, James?
No, I do
The
not.
planet's called Devon.
It's
or
Davin. So
Devon?
that's where I want to
Davin?
say Horus's ego got the better of him here at Davin.
Why?
So
why?
he was sent to Davin because Davin was a moon of. It was like one of the moons on Davin, and like a human population was put into compliance here. But some of the planets compliance being they had talked either through war or diplomacy, agreed to come back into the Imperial fold. They're part of the Imperium. They were compliant. But some of those planets would rebel afterwards. They didn't like the bills or the
tithes or whatever.
They had to pay
The
tithes.
tithes.
Soldier tithes, monetary tithes, all that stuff.
Taxes even?
Exactly. Yeah. So they rebelled. But this was a planned rebellion on Davin because there was
Planned by who?
because of the Erebus and the word bearers.
Erebus again. He's the villain of the whole
Well,
thing.
the word bearers were like
They were traitors.
they were like legit,
traitors.
like not
Full-on
good.
traitors.
They were like full on one of the 18 legions that were just straight up.
Yes.
They were like they were also kind of like angry at the emperor because they wanted to worship the
Because of
emperor as
Were
like
they,
a god.
were they a crime syndicate? Were they?
Well,
I don't think they were extorting anyone really, but they were doing big imperial crimes.
Yep.
They were big crime time.
Yep.
Everything
They
were
also had
doing
the
was
first
illegal.
possessed.
Yes, the Galvorback, the chosen sons of yeah. So, anyways, the word bearers
Argotol.
Argotol. He is the first Marine to ever be possessed by a demon.
Yes.
They're called the Galvorback. I think the chosen sons is what it translates to of Lorgar. But the word bearers went traitor 60 years before all of this happened.
Yeah, they're the oldest.
And they were traitor.
They were like creating shrine worlds to chaos.
Yes.
I love the sounds of that.
So we talked about it earlier in another segment with Monarchia, where they had built.
Vengeance for Monarchia!
So what the word bearers were doing, I don't want to go into so many details. The word bearers.
Please give it all.
Okay, so quickly, the word bearers were one of the legions going around and conquering planets to bring them back into the Imperial fold, but they were the least efficient at it. And it kept drawing the attention of the Emperors. Like, why are for every one planet they're bringing in, Horus is bringing in like 4 or 5 or something.
Yeah.
Like, what's going on here? What they were doing was they were conquering a planet, and in addition to getting them used to the new Imperial way of life, they were also teaching them to worship the Emperor, because the word bearers were all fervent worshipers of the Emperor. Lorgar was dead set that no one could be capable of all this unless he was a god. And Lorgar was always a firm believer that humans need religion or something to believe in to strive to be better or to do better or to be better. So Lorgar was the philosopher. He was the theologist, I guess. I think
The Emperor was like, no.
Yeah. So he warned them, because it takes so long to convert the entire population over religiously. So he would warn them and warn them and warn them. He's like, religion is outlawed. Religion is outlawed. Stop this. And then he eventually had to show up himself and divert his own crusading fleet, because he was still part of the crusade at this time. And he met them at Monarchia with Guilliman, the Primarch of the Ultramarines, and his Legion of the Ultramarines.
And he did not like Guilliman.
No, because Guilliman and the Ultramarines showed up to chastise the word bearers.
That's right.
Yes.
Pride hurt.
Yes, and actually Malcador was there too, because I remember Lorgar slapped Malcador to the ground because Malcador would not stop running his mouth.
Yes.
Yeah, Malcador's a poor old man. So what happened was the Emperor rarely talks. He always talks through Malcador. So Malcador was talking to Lorgar, essentially saying like, you were warned. And Lorgar was getting upset, like, why do I have to listen to this human? So Lorgar slaps him down, and then that's when the Emperor steps in. Guilliman was only there as like a
Sick 'em.
essentially, yeah. It was more of a all of the word bearers were that. Like, these legions are hundreds of thousands, like 150,000 Marines strong. And they're all there at this meeting, like a very public meeting between Lorgar and the Emperor and Malcador. And then Lorgar's trying to appease the Emperor's like, don't you understand humans need this? And then the Emperor essentially, in so few words, said, I'm tired of you not listening to me on your own. You're going to have no choice but to listen to me now. So he uses the psychic will to force every word bearer to take a knee, and Lorgar. He forces them all to the ground psychically. And then I think he like physically hurts them, like as like a looks like shock collar punishment kind of thing. Embarrasses them, the entire legion, right in front of
Yes, embarrassed. Yeah.
Absolutely just embarrassed. Like, he's like, I'm tired of this. I warned you. And after that, Lorgar reflected on it a little bit and had said, well, maybe he's right. Maybe this is the path I shouldn't pursue. But then Erebus and Lorgar's proxy father, who raised him on Colchis. It's hard to pronounce, yeah. He raised him and Erebus because they used to worship other gods. Oh gosh, there's so much more. Oh my gosh. Because like,
No, this is good. We're in the first heretic right now.
So,
right?
but this is like such an integral part to the heresy,
Yes.
because the pride of the legions was like massive, and then they kind of switch from forcing people to like then the whispers of chaos and the chaos gods or whatever start like corrupting them even more. They turn to chaos as actual gods of chaos, and they're like, and so then they start kind of working for chaos.
this is, and the how this happened is one of the more fascinating parts of the Horus Heresy. So he reflects on this, and on their homeworld, that human population used to revere a pantheon of gods that were not so far separated from the chaos gods. They did not use their names. It was one of those classic examples of they worshipped a pantheon of gods that had their own names and their own philosophies and their own beliefs, but they were all tied to the chaos gods. They were very clearly the chaos gods. But Lorgar, growing up, had these visions of this shining singular entity that was coming to save them, and it was the god Emperor. He had foreseen his father coming by, and then he had convinced a small part of the population, because of Lorgar's deeds as an individual, like, maybe this guy's like the prophet, or like, we'll follow him. And I like what he's saying, because screw these other gods. And so more and more people started following him, and there was a massive religious civil war on this world where Lorgar and his followers won. Erebus and Corferon said that they were on his side, but they never gave up their belief of the old pantheon. So they were still his father and Erebus, his main go-to guy. He's like almost his like religious like shoulder in a way, like a priest to go to or something like that. Because again, he didn't want to think that all his thoughts were like the correct thoughts, so he tried to defer to someone else. And then they never stopped their worship of the old pantheon, but they didn't want to be slaughtered because it was like a pretty brutal like genocide. Anyways,
This is awesome. This is awesome. Keep going. Keep going.
So after they got chastised by the Emperor, Lorgar went into like a deep thought, and he wanted to go on. He wanted to find out more about the galaxy, the universe, essentially. So him and his fleet, he ordered the fleet to go on a pilgrimage somewhere. He didn't know where. He just said, "We're just gonna go somewhere. We're just gonna go somewhere, and we're gonna see where this takes us. We're gonna." He had talked with the Emperor, and they said, "We'll be back. We're gonna work on compliance. We're just gotta go do this one thing." He's like, "Whatever," almost. And then he ends up on a planet where there's like this purple this purple nebula nearby. Turns out it's the Eye of Terror, and the people there worship this. They'll have purple eyes and everything. They worship this this entity up there, and they had for a while, and then they end up flying into it eventually through space. Funny enough, that planet was Cadia that they landed on.
Funny enough.
Yep. So Cadia, they're all infamous. They all have purple eyes on Cadia because they're so close to the Eye of Terror.
Like glowing purple eyes?
Yes.
Or?
Yeah.
Like a hue of purple.
Yeah.
It's a characteristic Cadian thing because they're always staring up at it. Like it's like essentially the
They're also psycho conditioned to like not go crazy by looking at the Eye of Terror.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they, without realizing it, they kind of worshipped. They worshipped it in a way. They didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And it kind of influenced them all. And then he got there, and then this is where his whole revelation came in, where he started talking to them, and they started explaining their pantheon to him. He's like, "Wait a tick, this is the same pantheon we had at Colchis." And then he's like, and then he started like studying other things and started seeing the parallels and similarities. He's like, "I got to go in there and investigate this." So he goes in there, and then
he goes. So Lorgar,
the whole fleet goes
into the Eye of Terror,
which is a giant rend in space and time.
Yes.
That goes directly to the warp, where chaos demons live.
Yes. So he goes right in there with the entire fleet, and obviously all the technical. They don't mess with the ship. They don't have Geller fields or anything like that at this point.
What is a Geller field?
No, they do. But
what's a Geller field?
They didn't know what that was.
So they
they didn't. It's okay. Good. Yeah. So they discover a thing that they name a Geller field.
It was something they turned on their when they're traveling through the warp. It was something they turned on their ships to get through the warp. That's all they knew. What it was to prevent the Immaterium to get in and everything.
It's like a protection.
It's a little bubble
against the warps.
Demon shield.
It's a demon shield.
Demon shield. Okay, cool.
But they obviously weren't told what that was. There was like, you need this to travel through the warp, or you'll get lost.
Who was saying this to Lorgar?
No, this was just
that was just the general thing for all the ships.
Got it. They knew that they had to do this.
Yep. So they go into the Eye of Terror, and he asked Argol Tal and because he's like the first captain of whatever, I can't remember what company, but he asked him and his sons to go fly deeper into it and try and communicate with. They're having a hard time communicating with something, and then they go in there, communicate, they come back, and they're all possessed, immediately possessed by demons. They're the first, but their possession was a little bit more elegant, I guess, where they could assume their original human form and then also just spawn into demons whenever they wanted to. But their power armor they couldn't take off their power armor anymore. Because their power armor would mutate with them.
It's like fused into their body.
Fused into their flesh.
Their armor became their flesh, basically.
And then Lorgar got talking with some shamans, and then they kind of like jumbled it up a little bit, and they allude to the fact that he had talked to the Chaos Gods, and Corferon and Erebus were like, "This was always our destiny," kind of thing. It's like, we never stopped worshiping them. He's like, "What do you mean never stopped worshiping them?" It's like, look at this. How could we not? Kind of. And then he's like, "This is it. This is the Pantheon. I should have never." He's like, then he felt all this remorse for like straying away from the Pantheon to begin with. And then he's like, "Okay, well, we have to teach the truth of the ruinous powers." Essentially, I can't remember what he calls them. Not the ruinous powers.
Primordial truth.
The primordial truth. Thank you. The primordial truth of the galaxy. Yes. So he went back, and then they started the warrior lodge. They had a bunch of plans.
Yeah, and then the warrior lodges, by the way, start infiltrating into the lunar wolves.
Yep.
Which is Horus's legion.
Yep.
And they were sort of like an outlawed group because they were like, like a lodge, but it was like a very
society.
It was like a secret society, and the Space Marines weren't supposed to have any sort of like allegiance to anything that wasn't like kill, maim, burn.
It was like a really hush hush. Your rank doesn't matter down there anymore. You can go.
This isn't a warrior lodge.
This is like this is what they started forming these warrior lodges because like what the word bearers did is they sent chaplains to all of the legions with the idea of like, hey, this is some concept we came up with the Word Bearer Legion that we found that this was a great way to relieve like
It's a good
stress.
team building
It's a great team
exercise.
building exercise. This way you can talk to your officers and express how you feel and not have to worry about offending them in this area. And then, they can empathize with you a little bit. Because at the time in the Horus Heresy, the Space Marines are very different than modern 40K Space Marines. They're given a lot more free will and a lot more personal time, and they can do with them what they want. Whereas the 40K Marines are a lot more indoctrinated, a lot more just pure warrior. That's it. They're strict because of the Horus Heresy, a lot more strict regime in how they live their life.
Yeah.
But anyways, these warrior lodges kicked off. Not all the legions liked them. Most of them did, though.
It was Lorgar's idea to institute warrior lodges.
With the idea of kind of giving them like little tastes of chaos, like influence, chaotic influence.
So that was his intent, is to like...
and sow discord against the Emperor. Yeah.
Ah.
So it's like a drip, drip, drip.
So that was his Trojan horse.
And it took 60 years. It was like a 60-year plan. It was like a plan, literally generations in the making. Yeah. It took a long time.
Wow.
Marines live a long time. So,
But then, and this is something that like some diehard sort of like, was it Garrow, right? He finds out about the lodges.
he
or
knew
whatever.
something was up. Yeah.
And he's like, so it's not like some of these like loyal Space Marines within the legions
They would
know
detect it. They would,
something's
something's
up.
a little fishy here.
And so at that cusp where there's like, Horus needs to like make something happen. That's where like the massacre was Istvan 5 happens. And that's like the apex of like the beginning of the Horus Heresy.
And it was like one of the main things in these lodges that were like one of the questions was like, you trust your officer, right? Like you trust him with your life. It's like, yeah, I do. I just don't like this one call he does. Like, okay, that's good. We can talk about that here. And then it's like, do you trust your Primarch? And it's like, yeah, of course I would do anything for Horus, anything like that. And it's like, do you trust the Emperor? It's like, yeah. It's like, well, where is he? Well, they started to like put into the fact that Horus is here. Your officer is here.
Seeds of discord.
Correct. It's like, but why do you trust the Emperor? It's like, well, I mean, he's the Emperor. It's like, well, if Horus told you to do something, the Emperor told you to do something, what would you do? It's like, I guess I would do what Horus told me to do, but like he would never. And then more.
You start to question.
They started to use that to test who was loyal to the Primarch and who was loyal to the Emperor.
Yeah.
And they started noting that down.
And are those remembrancers?
No.
That was just them keeping tabs.
Those are just humans
Those
that
are
are
just
part of the
humans.
fleets that were journalists. That's all they were. They're journalists.
Oh, okay. All right. So
This is the fancy word for journalist. Either video or news or art. It was a broad term to cover. We need to.
A blogger.
Yeah, they wanted to keep track. They wanted to keep track of the Great Crusade, so they needed people to keep track of it, like records,
Social
records
media
all that
influence.
okay. All right. So going back to the warrior lodges, they're just
Sowing discord
Yeah.
and seeing who was loyal to their Primarch and who was loyal to the Emperor.
And
Right.
who was it Lorgar asking? Was it basically,
No, it was
He told the
his
chaplains.
agents
Yeah.
would
okay,
go
but
in.
it's his intent.
His
Manifest
intent.
through his.
So what they do is they end up being able to split the legions into.
Erebus was the chaplain who went to the Sons of Horus.
Right. So then you have the legions. So then eventually, as it goes, they're able to go, okay, so these companies of our legion are still loyal. If the Emperor and Horus were to do something, they would do what the Emperor says. And these would do what Horus says.
Yeah.
So then they decide to cleanse all of the Emperor-loving
So
Space
that's what
Marines.
Isfan 5.
Yeah.
the drop site massacre. Yeah,
The drop site massacre is.
And they literally send them onto the planet with the pretext of fighting.
Yep.
They fight.
Which
and
Angron
then they
loved.
send. Well, Angron was on his ship.
Yeah.
Like he goes down after.
Was he
But-
clueless? Was he?
No, Angron.
Did he know? Was he left out of the loop? Okay, when I say clueless, I mean like once again, it was him who was.
Angron was just happy to murder everything.
This is where and then this is where I find it a little confusing because Horus was corrupted. He was influenced somehow here, and he kind of like knew which Primarchs were loyal to him and which Primarchs not necessarily loyal to him, but were against the Emperor. There was a lot of animosity between some of the Primarchs and the Emperor for certain things. Like Perturabo hated the way the Emperor used his legion. I think so. They were like a punching bag essentially. Angron just straight up hated the Emperor.
You're talking about the Thunder Warriors.
Perab was sent in, constantly grinding things down.
Yeah,
And
he always
then
had the hardest.
Once he won, he got sent on to the next campaign, and somebody got to sit there and cozily.
So Perturabo's his Iron Warriors, his Legion of Iron Warriors were always the
spearhead.
Always fed in the
they're the dirty work. They always get stuck with the dirty work.
And he did not like that.
Yeah, because he thought that the Emperor did not value his warriors, but Perturabo loved his Iron Warriors.
And then you have
That's
someone
not
like,
true.
Well, Well, I suppose.
Printable loved himself, loved his ego, and loved his victories, and he needed his soldiers to continue with his victories, and he didn't like bad losses. He didn't like be told when he had a better way of doing things, and he didn't feel like he did the most work in the Crusade and the most during the Heresy, but he never got the credit. Somebody else always did.
I mean, it was one of those, like, he was definitely the kid in class who wanted the teacher to say, "Good job on getting an A+."
He needed
the recognition.
He needed the validation and acknowledgement that what he was doing was important and that it was
But
valued.
like every Primarch's a little different. Like you've got the Iron Warriors, they didn't like was not afraid. So of course a lot of those that were like against the Emperor kind of turned to the War Master.
They all had little flaws.
As and they all had
like Printable, you could tell him a simple task of just take your fleet one system over, and he'll do that. But then he'd be upset because he didn't get a pat on the back for it. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like he just needed constant validation.
Yeah.
It's like, thank you for listening to what I told you to do, essentially.
So
and you have like someone like Conrad Cruz who is clairvoyant and has like premonitions, but he doesn't know if his premonitions are like they literally made him go crazy.
Yeah, he was.
Okay, you're talking about Conrad?
Yeah, another traitor that allied with Horus, but it was more like he didn't ally with Horus. Like he was just a renegade. He just wanted to fight against. He got kind of screwed over because he was separated from his legion for the most part. His legion wanted to work with Horus. A lot of the allegiances are kind of.
I feel like Kurz always kind of felt like, it's not my choice.
Conrad Kurz is the Primarch of the Night Lords.
So he was he was vilified by the other Primarchs because no one liked how he conducted war.
He was also like very like black and white. Like you did any crime, any crime, you just dead.
You stole a purse?
Yeah, dead.
Like it's like crime is death. No matter
he was very, very cut and dry. But that's of course their upbringings and their own planets.
He grew up on a crime world. His world was run by criminal overlords, and he was tired of seeing the corrupt officials and the corrupt law enforcement do nothing.
So he became Batman.
He literally became Batman.
Yes, he's the Batman Primarch. Yes,
he's the Batman Primarch.
Yeah.
But his main
messed up Batman.
His main approach to conflict.
He's the Thomas Wayne Batman.
He's definitely he's not a nice Batman.
Yeah. So his if a world wasn't compliant, he would just use terror tactics to make them compliant.
That's why it's terror tactic. That's why it's fear-based mechanics in the game all the time.
Yeah.
Yep. So his but he didn't like being vilified by the other Primarchs. They're saying like what you're doing is wrong. He's like, I'm the tool the Emperor needs for this job, kind of thing. But
not the one he wants, but the one he needs.
Right, but he never really got recognition from the Emperor either, because like the Emperor was very hush hush about it. He's like, he would send him on these missions, and then that was kind of it. But everyone else would hear the stories about it, and like, gee, what is going on over there? And then, but Horus was always kind of like played like
he
the
also
benevolent brother kind of thing. Yeah,
he also understood the function.
Yes.
Of the Legion.
Whereas like the Emperor would never give him gratification or understand. Horus was very like, I understand why you have to do this. Kind of like, I get it. Now, Horus was an understanding brother.
Well, and then we have Istvan 5 where you have, was it World Word Bearers?
All of the
World Eaters?
Yeah.
Was it the Death Guard? Was Death Guard there?
Yep.
Yes.
So
and
Iron Warriors were not there.
No.
Leave a comment if you're in this race when you're typing right now. If you can name all the legions that fell to.
Well,
9 of them went traitor. But
which 9 went traitor?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let us know in the comments.
So this is where Horus is, because he had started after his essentially rebirth, and he started putting these plans in motion because he had known he had this goal. He was always talking with Erebus in secret in his like.
So now with the Conrad Kurz?
Sorry.
Who are we on now?
So we go back to Horus, kind of more back to like Scari's point.
Back to Horus.
Like where the heresy popped off the first and like game winning. I think Horus won the war right away. And then, like the rest of the story elements is how the good guys overcame.
Yeah, because that's a massive blindside.
Yeah. Because what ended up happening was Erebus and Horus were always having these secret meetings. Loken hated this. Actually, the Mournival kind of hated it because they were pushed away. No longer was Horus talking to the Mournival. He was talking to Erebus only.
Oh, man.
But they never go into scenes about those conversations. They only see it from the point of view of the Mournival.
Yeah.
And so you can only assume what those conversations are. And all of a sudden he had all these like orders out of nowhere. He's like, okay, because he's the War Master. So he gets to dictate the war or the Great Crusade. And this is a masterstroke. He knows exactly who he can convince and who he can't convince. He knows that Leman Russ and Magnus would never turn, so he catches. I can't. James, do you remember how Magnus caught wind of Horus?
He's psychic, right? Isn't he? Doesn't he have a premonition about it?
No. So when Horus is on Davin and he's being manipulated by Erebus, Magnus scries on it, right? He watches it in the warp, and he tries to, because Erebus is trying to trick Horus, and so Magnus comes in and he's like, "No, don't listen." And Horus is like, "Oh, you're lying to me. You're just a figment of the warp. You're the one lying." So he can't convince Horus not to go to Chaos. So he's like, "Oh shoot, I gotta tell the Emperor."
Yeah, but at this point, Magnus there was the
Council of Nicaea.
There was the big Council of Nicaea where there was
awesome.
This was also this was part of the Word Bearer's plan as well. The abolishment of psychic powers in the legions because of a lot of issues popping up.
There's so much in
I know.
the
So much.
So there was a giant council where the Emperor and all the Primarchs met up, and they had just essentially agreed no more psychic powers in the legions. You have the librarians are all now basic linemen. They're no longer librarians. No one's allowed to use psychic powers anymore. And he essentially talked to Magnus saying, keep this in check.
So it was forbidden.
Yes, it was forbidden to use psychic powers. Because it ties into the fact that because they're tapping into their psychic powers, they're tapping into the warp, and they are thus taking one step closer to chaos.
But he's not really explaining what that is.
But the Emperor is of the firm belief that ignorance will protect them from chaos. Whereas Malkador was always arguing that no, if you teach them, they will know what to not do. Right?
Yeah.
As opposed to them, there's so many of them, they're gonna accidentally stumble into this. It's better to know what to avoid and have some of them decide to play with it, then everyone else knows how to deal with it. And then the Emperor was like, no, ignorance is their only salvation.
Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah. And then, but
an open mind is like a fortress with its gates unbarred and unguarded.
Exactly. And so the Council of Nicaea happens. The Emperor goes back to work on a secret plan. There's a massive protective psychic barrier around where the Emperor is. Again, all the Primarchs are kind of like annoyed about what's going on and why is this happening. Rogel Dorn is pulled back to Terra to act as like the what's it called? The Sentinel of Terra.
Gatekeeper.
Yeah. He's
Praetorian.
the Praetorian.
Yeah,
He's like, the Emperor's coming back and he wants one legion to protect him because the other ones can perform the Great Crusade. Rogel Dorn wasn't happy about that, but whatever, he did anyways. And so everything was a big secret. So Magnus, with all of his most powerful sorcerers, librarians in the Thousand Sons, do some pretty big wig ritual to project Magnus's mind across the galaxy to go talk to the Emperor.
But this just happens to also open a warp rift.
Yes. So he comes
on
across
Terra.
this barrier on Terra that he can't get across, and he knows the Emperor's in this barrier. And then he has the question: does my ego say that I know better than the Emperor and force my way through this to get the message across? Because surely he has to know this message, or do I just step off and try and figure this out another way? He decides to break through the barrier.
The right call.
And then the Emperor was fierce because it shattered the barrier, and then the warp kind of knew something was up. The ruinous powers, they immediately swarmed it and attacked it, and
and that was the big project. And so
and then Magnus shows up. Magnus knew he messed up. He knew
he messed up good.
He's seen exactly what he
You
did.
can quote us.
And he's
Magnus did everything.
Like, oh my gosh, but you have to know like what's going on. And the Emperor refused to believe that Horus Von Traitor. Refused to believe it. So even though that the Magnus went through all of this, the Emperor still refused to believe him. So Magnus pulled back. He's like, okay, I'll figure this out on my own.
But then,
So because Magnus broke the Council of Nicaea using the psychic powers and the rituals,
Is it actually called that?
the Council of Nicaea.
Yeah, that's the.
And then he
the
sicks
Council of
the policeman of the
I'm thinking
Emperor
about
on him.
that council, Steve.
So he contacts Horus and he says, "Look, I need you to get." He told Magnus to come back, and then Magnus said, "No, I'm not going to do that." Blah blah blah. And then he talks to Horus. I think generally, I could be wrong here. He talks to Horus and he says, "Can you go and get Magnus and bring him back? Just bring Magnus back." And then Horus is like, "Perfect. This was like a great opportunity for Horus. He had no idea this was going to happen."
So the Emperor is saying to Horus, "Go get Magnus back."
Because Magnus is not
Because
listening.
the Emperor's like thinks that Horus is his most loyal and trusted son.
He's the first
right?
son he ever found,
Right.
and like, he pointed in War Master. He trusts him more than anything.
Is this before or after Horus is stabbed with the blade?
This is after.
This is
Horus
after.
has gone traitor already.
Horus is like
He's coming up
already
with
coming
plans.
up with the plan.
So he's already traitor.
Yeah.
He's already like, no.
Well, this ties into what Luca was saying, where he's like, he knew. So Horus knew exactly which Primarchs were going to side with him.
Yep.
He knew who in each legion was like loyal to the Emperor and was loyal to him.
And then the ones that were loyal to him, he knew which ones would not be loyal to him.
Correct. So he's like, Magnus won't trust me, right?
Yeah.
Because Magnus knew, like he knew that Magnus knew. And then he sees this as an opportunity to then send the Space Wolves.
Yeah. So
that's why they hate each other.
Yes.
That's why they.
So the Russ is like the Emperor's executioner. Russ deals with all the internal kind of like struggles. So Horus, this was the perfect opportunity because Horus was kind of stumped on what to do with the space. He had plans for everyone else. He didn't know what to do with the Space Wolves and the Thousand Suns.
Because the Space Wolves were like,
Because the traitors were outnumbered. The traitors were heavily outnumbered.
Yeah.
So he said, this is perfect. So he gives the message to Russ, except instead of the bring Magnus back, he says, kill all of the Thousand Sons and Magnus. And that's an order from the Emperor. Yeah. And then Leman Russ is like, Leman Russ and Magnus already had a little bit of animosity towards one another. Leman Russ did not want to do it, but he's like, you have to go do this thing. So he goes to, so he sicks Leman Russ on Magnus and the Thousand Sons. And there's a lot of diplomacy at first saying like, I got to bring you back. I don't want to kill you kind of thing. But like it comes to war anyways. So what that plan was, he knew the conflict between those two legions was going to be so intense and so brutal that they're going to be devastated. There'll be nothing left. Not a fighting force left. He was actually kind of hoping they both kill each other as well. What ends up happening is Leman Russ kills Magnus, technically. He becomes some sort of weird warp entity still. He like exists. He like breaks his back. And then all the Thousand Sons are pretty much killed, and most of the Space Wolves are killed as well. This is like a Pyrrhic victory for the Space Wolves at best.
So, because Magnus is depicted as massive.
Yeah.
So,
Magnus actually doesn't even put up a fight because he's so
disillusioned.
Yeah, he's like so depressed with what he decided to do. Like he knows he made the wrong call. He knows he messed up. And he's pretty much saying the whole time, like, let Russ come and kill me. I just don't care. Like, I screwed up so bad. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So he was like in massive, like, downward spiral. And his legion is just all of his like first captains and sorcerers have to like step up to essentially like defend Prospero.
And that's just because Horus was like
burning
a
up
strategic genius. So he goes and he's like, okay, I'm going to get the Thousand Sons and the Space Wolves to just kill each other. Right.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to get Gulliman and his Ultramarines to be busy on the other side of the galaxy.
Yeah, so he sends so this is where he tells Gilliman had just taken a new planet called Calth.
Betrayal of Calth.
Yes. So he says
I know the name of the product.
this is where his masterstroke comes in because he tells this a little bit afterwards, but he goes to Isfahan and he goes to Isfahan for compliance and he sends down all of his it's like the Death Guard, the Emperor's Children, the Luna Wolves, and there's one more. I can't remember which one was there. And he sends down the Loyalist forces. And he
Emperor's Children.
Emperor's Children, yeah. And he just virus bombs them.
Virus bombs them.
Virus bomb.
And then they notice that some of them survived, and that's when the drop pods come
And
down.
that's when they know it's
Yes.
actually on now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So because
Some survive.
all of the Loyalists
They
that
do.
went down there knew something's up. Because
Not
like,
many.
why are we
Why
going
are
so-
all of our friends going down?
Yeah. Why then like Loken starts cluing, it's like, none of the people from the Warrior Lodge are coming down here and like all this stuff. And then Rylanor knows something up, and like so that's where Nathaniel Garrow was supposed to go down. He's the Death Guard. And he stayed up and he noticed that Ignatius Grulgor and a bunch of the Second Company were loading up virus bombs. Like, why are you loading up virus bombs? It was like a whole thing on like the Eisenstein was the name of the ship
Yeah.
they're on.
And then the Flight of the Eisenstein
fourth book in the
happens.
Heresy, yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's them trying to go back to Terra to warn the Emperor, and they come across Borgildor and everything.
So, okay, this is going to be painful.
This is just the
I know,
beginning.
because we
This is the beginning.
painful because we have to pause it. There's a live stream happening. So we're gonna continue this. There's gonna be part 2.
But
Okay?
thanks for having me, folks.
Stay
How
tuned.
it pops off. Yeah.
Thank you. Scary probably won't be here for part 2. But thank you everyone for tuning in.
Sorry.
Part 2 is going to complete.
37.
Thanks again for tuning in, folks. I'm MiniWarGamer Dave, and you're in the Maelstrom of Lore.